I've been collecting cookbooks and reading cookbooks, looking at pictures in cookbooks for decades, so I have a few. Nothing much really has changed in cooking, and still everything has changed. Everything is different. We look at new techniques, we look at how we used to do things, we're finding ways to go back to how we used to do things. We do the foraging, we do fermenting, and you feel as if the cooking world clashes, but really, if you look at it closely, nothing much has changed. Techniques in the kitchen, equipment in the kitchen that we're using, absolutely. There's a world of change over the past 100 years. But when it comes down to the food we put on the table, it's different, but the basics come down to the same thing over and over again. If something is good and tastes good, it'll stick around for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. I'm looking at two books here. I'm fortunate to have one from 1890. It's called The Practical Cookbook. It is very old, you can tell, and it's very used. There's even some handwritten recipes in there from those days still. In a writing I can hardly read. There's an exotic menu. It was once cooked for a queen and a king in Europe, and it wants to clash, but not really, with something called molecular gastronomy at home. This is probably as funky as it gets for your home kitchen, but it's an amazing guide to do experimenting at home with techniques and ingredients that we're not usually using every day in the kitchen. But again, today is going to be about how good things don't change because they're just plain good. It's that simple. We're going to cook a vegetable soup. From clearing out your vegetable drawer after you've cooked for people here, for yourself there, you have a half a head of cauliflower, a bit of broccoli, a bit of fennel, some peppers, you have some carrots and onions at home all the time, I'm sure. We're going to use that. So let's make a soup, and let's make it from a basic, filling us and making us feel good when the days get shorter and colder, and add a little bit of new to it to make it more exciting. I'm hoping you're going to enjoy that. Welcome to my kitchen. So welcome to the ancient vegetable soup kitchen. Let's pretend this is your vegetable drawer, and you might have bits and pieces of some, 2 or 3, or all of it and more. Squashes, I don't have all vegetables here, but quite a few. We are going to start with a couple of carrots, maybe an eggplant, some bok choy, maybe a couple more carrots, a bit of celery, and onion definitely. Since we have tomatoes, we might as well use a couple of those. Cauliflower, I don't know about you, but unless you have a big family, you can really not always use up a whole head of cauliflower. So I usually have some florets in my vegetable drawer, and that's going to be good to use for this. We'll just take a little bit off of that. And because it's all going to be cooked together, we don't need to worry too much about how we chop it. Make sure that your harder vegetables, like your onions and your carrots and maybe your fennel, if you have any in that mix, are cut a little smaller than the rest, because cauliflower cooks a lot faster than fennel or onions or carrots. So again, the hardier vegetables, the harder vegetables, smaller pieces. The softer vegetables, they can be bigger pieces. But we're going to semi-puree this soup, so it doesn't matter if your cuts are uniform or not, you just chop it up. Now, besides the fact that we're using up vegetables that may otherwise go lost in the fridge because we used them partially, this is really quite an inexpensive way of making a really good meal. We're going to be adding some meat, optional, to this soup. I'll show you in the end what you can do with it, or you can add some fish too. But as a plain vegetable soup, it's exciting. It tastes really, really good, and it doesn't break the bank at all. Plus, you're getting rid of all the things you had in your fridge and thought you might never use. Just a couple of potatoes. Potatoes will help to make the soup thicken. The starch from the potato will help that a lot, and it adds good flavor too. I am a potato lover, and by the way, we're adding potato and we're going to be adding some fennel. Fennel is a funny animal. It has an interesting flavor, a little exotic. I use it in all kinds of different dishes. You might want to try it if you haven't yet. One good way, starting out with fennel, if you haven't had it yet, might be, if you like mashed potatoes, just cook some fennel with your potatoes. And when you mash your potatoes, mash the fennel with it. It adds amazing flavor to mashed potatoes. Just give it a try. Okay, so does this look like your vegetable drawer in the fridge? Bit of everything? I'm sure it may. Mine always looks like that, because I just never seem to be able to use all of my vegetables all at the same time. So the outer leaf comes off. It's a pretty sturdy vegetable, and usually we use just the bulb, but if you, in the summer or in the fall when it's more local, if you can find fennel that has the greens on still, don't throw that out. It's beautiful. You just take those fine little green herby pieces off and you chop that up and you add it into your dish at the very end. Just sprinkle it on like you would with parsley or with chives. It's very delicious. So half of this will do. You cut the core out, and then the rest we can use in our soup. Cooking time for fennel is about the same as carrots. So if you want it real soft, you want to give it 25 minutes at least. And because we are partially pureeing this soup, we want all the vegetables soft, not like you would when you eat them as a side dish. So I think that's it. We can get cooking with those. To start our soup, we are going to have some olive oil. You want your heat at about medium. You don't want your vegetables to go crispy. Don't let them color it too much. This is a little hot. It will cool down in just a sec. So if this happens, like it just happened to me, that your pan is a little too hot or your pot, just keep stirring to make sure your vegetables don't brown. We'll saute the onions with the fennel just a little bit. And then we add the rest. Give it a good stir. Salt. Ground black pepper. And to give it an extra little bit of fun, some white wine never hurts. So the next step we're doing is the vegetable broth, but make sure, see the wine is still at the bottom of the pot. Make sure that all this liquid evaporates. You don't want the actual wine flavor in your soup. You just want a hint of that aroma. So we'll let it cook down, evaporate, and once it's almost all gone, we're gonna add the vegetable broth to it. Just because I have some extra, I will add some parsley into the mix. And you can tell I didn't chop it. I want it out before we puree it, so I leave the stalks on. But the parsley will add some very nice flavor to it. So our wine is almost gone. Half a more minute. And all that's missing now is our vegetable broth. And you can do vegetable or chicken broth or even beef broth, whatever flavor you prefer. About this much. We'll boil this without a lid on. And when you see how it's simmering and how the liquid evaporates a bit, you may want to add some more broth. We'll just see how it does. So all this in a little bit, I would say just let it simmer happily for 25-30 minutes so the veggies are nice and soft. Then we'll go and find a way to puree it. I don't want it all fine, so we're not going to puree it all the way. And I'll show you a couple of ways how to go about that. While the soup is cooking itself, really, no work from now on. It was, what, 5-6 minutes to chop up some vegetables, half an hour in the pot with some seasoning and broth. It'll just be happy in a half hour, nice and soft to be pureed. I'm gonna make some mini meatballs that I have come to love in all kinds of soups, clear soups, creamy soups, but in this one, I think it makes it turns it into a very hearty, very satisfying meal. And they're done quickly as well. I have a little shallot here. Here the chopping becomes a little more important. I'm taking a little bit more time for that because the meatballs are going to be tiny. So we don't need big, hard chunks of onion in the meat, in the ground meat, but very, very finely cut onion or shallot, either way. The meat I'm using is a half pork and half beef, just because I like that flavor. I'm trying to get these as fine as I can. I know this is a little bit of a chore, and if you're using shallot, you can feel it in your eyes much more than regular onions. If you don't at first succeed to get them tiny, just get a knife, a larger knife going and go through them with a larger blade, like we sometimes do with herbs, and they'll be nice and finely chopped. This is worth the effort, I promise. In they go. If you want these meatballs to be very soft, you can soak some bread in milk or water and then squish it out, put it in. I'm using some breadcrumbs. It makes the texture of the meatballs a little firmer than soaked bread. Again, all preference. So we have 1 egg, some breadcrumbs, the onions. Oh, we might as well put some parsley in. That always adds a little beautiful flavor. If you had of your fennel, I was talking about it earlier, if you had some of those fine green pieces of your fennel, you could add that into your meatballs as well. And here we go. For seasoning, all I'm doing is salt, pepper, and a little paprika for color. There we go. Mix it up. If you are on the impatient side, like I usually am, I'm going to skip the fork and just go right in it with my hands and get this done and mixed evenly. This way you can see or feel easier if, and I do, if you need some more breadcrumbs to make it less wet. We had a pretty big egg for the amount of ground beef that I'm using, so a little more bread will make it just right. You can tell when it's right when it stops falling apart and when it feels nice and dry. So if you can shape this, then and it lasts, you're good. So we need a plate to put our minis on. And if you're having trouble getting the same amount of meat going for each of the meatballs, just get a little spoon or something you measure with, and they're going to be nice and uniform. I'm not overly concerned, but if you have huge ones and tiny ones, they're not going to cook at the same time. You don't want that. So nice and small. This is actually the most work about this dish, but because it just eats so well together, I think it's worth the effort. So all the hard work is done for the meatballs, and all they take now is to go into some boiling water. Make sure once they're in, the water stops boiling. You just keep it at a light simmer so they don't come all apart. And all you need is probably about 5-6 minutes, because they're very tiny, for them to cook all the way through. Once they're done that, we'll take them out, put them on the side until our soup is done, and then we'll add it into the soup. You can see when they're starting to pop up that they're cooking nicely. And that's when you turn your heat down to a light simmer. And our vegetables are beautifully cooked, nice and tender. We're going to go and puree this. So the parsley doesn't hurt in there, but I was going to take the stalks out, some of it. But it'll puree just fine because it's been cooked well enough. So pureeing, again, I don't want to puree it all. I want some little pieces of the tender vegetables in there and puree the rest so that it becomes a thicker texture. Let's just see, you can either use an immersion blender, or if you don't have an immersion blender, use your blender, your mixer, and just keep some of the solids out so that you have a little bit of substance that will stay in there. So if you wanted to, we'd be ready to go putting a little bit of cream in our soup. You can see it has a bit of a greenish color. It depends very much, of course, on the kinds of vegetables we're putting in, because I did the bok choy. Green is it. Now the cream is going to lighten that up just a touch. And we would be ready to go put the meatballs in and serve, but I wanted to show you how you can serve this in different ways by, let's say we're doing a small portion that we're going to add some shrimp to. This we're going to use to add the meatballs to. And then the remainder will be your vegetarian version. And let's just drop the meatballs in here. You can tell this is a really, really hearty meal. And we'll put some shrimp in here. It'll only take a minute to warm the shrimp. They're already cooked. And when we're back, I'll show you how to serve these varieties of our leftover vegetable soup.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
When I felt scared, United Way had my back. 5 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom with 4 children, including one with special needs, and I was facing divorce. I needed a job fast and to figure out how to help my kids and myself through a difficult transition as gently as possible. With United Way funding, my kids were matched with mentors who provided guidance, attention, and a listening ear, which helped as I dealt with legal details and took job preparation classes. Now I see myself as a successful single mom who taught my kids how to become better, not bitter. My name's Kim, and donations to United Way Simcoe Muskoka helped change my life. Thank you.
What kind of show do you want to see on Rogers TV? What interests you? Log on to rogerstv.com, fill out a show proposal, and tell us about your segment idea. We want to know what you want to see. Rogers TV, only on Rogers.
So here we are with our delicious vegetable soup, leftover soup. We're going to start with, let's start with the shrimp version. You can even use some chunks of fish in there, which is very nice too. Now a nice warm slice of baguette with this makes it just perfect. I'm going to top it with a little sour cream. And I've chopped up a little bit of the fennel green mixed with a bit of celery green leaves. And this is going to be just fantastic. Then we'll do a plain one. Plain, not plain at all, because think of all the kinds of vegetables we have in there and you get the flavor of all of those. This is the non-meat version. And I think if that was me, I'd want some balsamic glaze on this just to give it a little bit of extra flavor. There we go. Number 3, for me the main version, the base version, that is your soup with meatballs, or if you love meat, call it meatballs with a little bit of soup. There we go. And all this really needs is some herb. We have some parsley here on top. And I think we should do another non-meat. And we're adding bacon, which is never wrong. I've fried up a couple of slices of pancetta. Can just go in here with some, let's just make it a nice crumbled cheese. This is a Balderson, beautiful little cheese. Put that around the bacon and make that a perfect meal. Now you could add, depending on how serious you are on being vegetarian, vegan, you could add a little bit of crumbled feta cheese with your balsamic glaze topping here, and I think that'll taste just beautiful. So there we go, 4 versions of one simple, easy to make soup. Very hearty, nice for cold winter and fall days. Seafood, bacon and cheese, meatballs, and a plain one for our vegetarian friends. You can go wild and add whatever you like to it. I think these 4 are very nice, all of them, but try them out. Let us know which one you like or didn't like. Quick and easy meal for a cold winter's night.